All right, guys, let's talk about the overhead squat. So everything, especially the squat variations, they're all a combination of a squat and a push-up. So everything in general is a combination or a variation of a squat, push-up, and the jump. And we use the same posture positions over and over again. That way these movements link together. So the overhead squat is an extremely challenging position. It's something when I started, it took me about 3 years to work up to a position that I could actually load with weight safely. So this isn't something that out of the box most people are capable of. So take your time, develop it. But the good news is when we link everything through a squat, a push-up, and a jump, and posture, and we work at the same time of resolving our mobility restrictions, what we see is we can develop the overhead squat movement without doing the overhead squat all the time. Doesn't mean we never need to do it, but if we're doing things the right way, we're going to be developing the overhead squat even though we're not training it constantly. So, how does the overhead squat fit into the squat, push-up, and the jump? I'm going to take my squat stance, belly button drawn in, butt tight, Kegel, twist your feet, ribcage down, stand tall, shoulders back, create that rotation. So this is my squat stance. And then I'm going to tie that in to how to hold the bar overhead. Shoulder back, create that rotation. Looks just like shoulder back, create that rotation that we do in the push-up. So it's just a combination of a squat and a push-up. So the key is we need to go back to our presses to figure out how to get the bar over our head in the first place. And now we just have a strange variation of a press. And it's strange because we have the bar on the back of our neck and we have a wide grip. So how wide do we grip or how narrow do we grip? The way we typically like to think of it is the narrower we go to a point, the stronger we are. The wider we go, we may be a little weaker, but our shoulder is going to have more room overhead. So we're going to have more mobility overhead. Since overhead squatting for most people is going to be mainly dependent on your mobility, we're going to use a wider grip. That way we can really help open up those shoulders. So with this wider grip, we're going to go ahead and get the bar on your back. I like to treat it like I'm in a back squat. So I go through the same routine. My back squat routine would start here. So I'm just going to use that different grip on the bar. Shoulders back, everything tight, twisting in. The key here is I want my elbows straight under that bar. So now I can either press the weight up overhead, I can push press the weight overhead, I can push jerk the weight overhead, or I could split jerk the weight overhead. So don't overlook getting the weight overhead. It's just a combination of variation of the same things. So once we have the weight overhead, we're going to try and lock the bar down. Everything stays nice and tight, and we're going to go through our squat. Now we start to see similarities to the front squat. So in the front squat, we've got our rack position, and as we squat, if we don't actively fight for that rack position, our elbows are going to drop. The same thing happens with our overhead position. As I'm overhead and as I squat, my torso naturally leans forward. So I'm going to have to stay active in the shoulder as I drive that bar back. So our center of gravity, we like to think of it as over the back of our neck. And so we want to constantly keep that weight as close to that frontal plane as possible. So we keep that bar balanced right where it is the lightest for you to hold. So as we get overhead, and I'm going to go ahead and flip around and face this way. But as we get overhead, and as I squat, I'm trying to drive that bar and keep it over the back of my neck. When I'm done, I'm just going to come back down to the back of my neck and kind of catch it with my legs. So we can try that a couple times. Come down and just try and catch it with my legs. And remember, if I was using the rack, I would face this way. This is just for demo purposes here. So, what are we doing in the overhead squat? Nice and tight, we're in our squat position. Shoulders are acting just like we do in a push-up. We're using a little bit wider of a grip to open up those shoulders. What we see is tight ankles and tight hips make people feel like their shoulders are tight. So most of the time, all of us could use a little more flexibility in the ankle, the hip, and the shoulder, but you can be too flexible, but it's really not all about that. So the overhead squat, if my ankles aren't working, my squat gets more bent over. Now my shoulders have to do all of this weird work. So a lot of people's reactions to the overhead squat is that their shoulders are tight. The reality is we need to be able to air squat with our torso really upright to be able to put our shoulders into a position that's fair for the shoulder. So even though shoulders might hurt from the position, or shoulders might feel like your limiting factor, that's just the thing that's breaking down. It could be caused by ankles and hips. So keep working on your squat, your push-up, and your jump. The more mature your squat becomes, the more mature that push-up shoulder position comes, the more stable and the more mobile you're going to be in the overhead squat position. Enjoy.